Hey guys, how's it going? I'm currently mixing the Rolling Stones and I'm using this EQ a lot, so it's an opportunity for me to show you this EQ plugin from IK Multimedia. It's part of the T-Rex range. Now, when I say I'm mixing the Rolling Stones, what I've got here is I've got two bootleg recordings, both done at the same gig, the final night of the Hyde Park gigs in London at the end of the 50th anniversary tour. I'm pretty sure it's the final night, the 13th. I was at that gig and it was an incredibly good gig. And I'm using this EQ a lot. So this gives us an opportunity. I mean, I'll just show you this EQ now because I'm using it and it gives me an opportunity to show it to you. Okay, so this is the T-Rex Master EQ 432. It's available as a standalone plugin. You can buy it individually or it's part of the T-Rex mastering suite if you buy a certain version of the suite, because they do three versions: a cheapest version which gives you I think 8 plugins, the more expensive version it gives you something like 12 or 16 plugins, and then the full blown version gives you all 38 plugins or whatever, right? Or there's the T-Rex custom shop where you can demo the plugins. You get a full proper demo which lasts, good God, I think it's 2 to 4 weeks, with no sound cutting out or noise being made or anything, at the end of which you can just buy the plugin if you want. Okay, so it's one of the T-Rex range, and this is basically an emulation of the famous Sontec mastering EQ, and this is considered to be one of the finest EQs ever made. It's thousands of dollars if you can find them. There are modern emulations I think that are made. It went through various iterations to arrive at this version that people recognise as the Sontec, and primarily this was designed all the way up as it was developed and designed and developed and tweaked. It was a vinyl mastering EQ for vinyl cutting, yeah, for lacquer cutting, okay. It's used in mastering suites all over the world. It's considered one of the best EQs ever. Super transparent, absolutely noiseless, blah blah blah, and this is IK Multimedia's emulation of it. Now I'm not going to get into how accurate that emulation is. The general, if you want to know, the general consensus of opinion out there across multiple arguments on the internet seems to be that it's very accurate. But then of course you've got your hardware purists who come wading in and telling everyone, well, it can't possibly be as good as the hardware version which I paid $12,000 or $20,000 for, blah blah blah. But there is a guy, if you want to look up that whole, how does this emulation compare to the original, if you want to get that, just search the internet for Sontec EQ versus T-Rex plugin. You'll find loads of discussions about it and arguments about it. And there's even a video out there. This one British guy's got a mastering company called Streaky Mastering. He owns a Sontec and he actually gives you an A/B comparison between the plugin and the real unit, albeit with conservative EQ being added, which is how you would really use this thing. I'm using it in a very extreme way, right? And it's very difficult to tell any difference at all in a blind listening test. But as I say, if you want to get into that whole argument, you're free to go for it, right? But I'm not going to get into that. But it is a very interesting EQ. Okay, it's a switching EQ, right? So you haven't got continuous choices of frequencies; they switch. Ergo, in the old days, you could set up a cut with a particular EQ setting. You could write it down on paper and you could always come back to the exact same settings. And the reason why you've got in this low band, for example, frequencies of 11, 13, 18, 15 and 20 hertz. I mean, these are very tightly spaced center frequencies, incredibly low. You're never going to hear these in the context of music production, because these are frequencies relevant to cutting lacquer masters, right? And equally at the top end it goes up to 25k. Again, these are frequencies relevant to cutting of lacquer. Okay, so this is the plugin. The original has a left-right side. but the plugin obviously doesn't need that. Both sides function for left and right, and like with all T-Rax plugins, if it's on a stereo track you can run it left, right, and you make your adjustments, and all these controls are doing the same thing to the left and right of the signal passing through. But like with most of these T-Rax plugins, where relevant, you can process left and right separately, have a different EQ to the left and right, or both the same, and you can do mid-side processing with them as well. Okay. Over here you've got your high and low shelf and your general output trim, and then over here there's the push EQ that brings EQ in and out, and unlike the original you've got a range in dB control here. I can switch this unit so that the boost and cut control for the 3 bands and the high and low shelf can be switched between 6 dB of boost cut, 9 dB of boost cut, or 12 dB of boost cut, and I've got it set on the most extreme one because I'm doing very extreme EQing for this. Right? I'm not using this in a traditional way, which would be far more subtle. Okay, so look over here, I don't know the dB octave slope of these 2 shelves. As far as I know, this top shelf is 10K fixed, and the low shelf can be switched between 100 and 50 Hertz, between 100 or 50 Hertz. Right? And okay, I've got it in 12 dB boost cut mode, so both of them give you 12 dB of boost or cut. And then we got the low band here, which goes from an incredibly low, as I said, frequency of 11 Hertz all the way up to 570 Hertz. So very fine frequency divisions in these low like sub-bass frequencies, where you'll want to zone in and do stuff in terms of vinyl cutting, lacquer mastering, cut, yeah. When you want to have real control over potentially problematic bass end rumble frequencies when you're doing the cut. So very fine increments here, 11, 13, 18, 15, yes those two actually are that way round, 18 comes before 15, 20, 25, 30, 36, 42, then it gets to 50, 60, 71, 85, 100, 120, 140, 170, etc. up to 570. There's your Q control, wide or very tight, or tight, yeah, wide or tight. And there's your boost cut control. Again, I've got it set to 12 dB for all bands, right? Okay, then there's your mid band here. There's your Q. This goes from 125 Hertz up to 6,200 Hertz, or 6.2K. Again, huge amount of center frequency choices. And the way this one works is you get 125, 150, 180, 210, 250. These are roughly 25, 30 Hertz increments apart. Then we get here 253, 350, 420, then 5, 6, 700, 840, 1K, 1.2, 1.4, 1.7, 2, 2.4, etc. up to 6.2. There's your Q, tight or wide, and I've got it on 12 dB of boost or cut. And finally your high band here. This isn't a shelf, this is a bell type band, right? There's your Q, wide or tight. And this goes from 3.4K right up to 25K. As I said again, frequencies that you think you won't hear, but vinyl does have harmonic frequencies up there. Hence those frequencies are included. Okay, so this was primarily designed as a mastering EQ, coffee, for cutting lacquer, but you can use it on individual tracks. It's supposed to be very neutral, very transparent, a very fine sound. Particularly the shelf is supposed to be a beautiful high smooth shelf for adding air, you know, etc. Okay, but as I say, you'd use it quite conservatively to do tweaks, but I'm using it in a very extreme way because of the material I'm mixing. It's this Rolling Stones bootleg recordings done at 2 different locations in the venue. Let me just close this for a minute. So this track here, if I put the headphones on, is very, very thin. This was recorded about 80 yards from the stage, further back in the field, There was a stand there slightly to the right of the stage centre as you face the stage, where you could pay extra to sit in this stand and watch from a bit further away and from an elevated position, I think. And I think the guy was recording from the fence in front of that stand, so he isn't surrounded by a lot of crowd whooping and yelling and screaming. There's very little audience noise on it in terms of that type of audience noise. You hear the cheers at the end of and start of songs, etc. But there's not tons and tons of shouting and screaming and whooping and hollering from people watching standing right next door to the person recording. And then this track is much thinner because it's further away. This is it. And then this was recorded right at the front at the fence. Well, the crowd is all around the guy recording it. So there's a lot of whooping and hollering and talking and shouting that gets on it, etc. And it's very bass end heavy, and you can see one side is overloaded compared to the other, and it sounds like this. And then with no EQ at all, the two of them combined sound like this. Etc. Right? So what I did is I started off by putting the two different recordings on the two tracks and lining them up, syncing them up, which had to be done visually. And then I put one of the EQs on each track. So that's the first track's EQ, and then this is the second track's EQ. Now, when you're mixing this kind of material, which is really badly recorded, I'm doing very extreme boosts or cuts, and it's not a case of just doing it and leaving it. The way that I arrived at this is I would do very big EQ boosts or cuts at different frequencies on one of the tracks, and then bring the other one in and do the same thing and try and balance it. And then I'd swap that around a lot of the time. Like I might give this a big boost in the mids to bring up the mids on the very bassy track, and try these mids instead of the more prominent mids here. So reduce these mids, boost these mids, listen to it, have a listen, fiddle a bit, and then switch that round. So I bring the mids back on this and reduce the mids on that, or whatever, right? It's a constant process of massive EQing, big massive EQ movements, far bigger than you'd normally do them, listening, and then usually swapping things around, trying it and trying it and trying it. Okay, you can see I've got quite big amounts of boost or cut. Yeah, these are all boost 7 dB, 6 dB, 7, cutting 6, boosting 7, etc. So it's quite extreme what I'm doing. So I've got the basic EQ on each, and then I discovered that this track, it actually worked better if I put a gainer on it and I reversed the phase and swapped the left-right channel, and then I've panned this slightly to compensate for this side being more overloaded. Trust me, it's very subtle, but if I take this out so the phase isn't reversed anymore, it just focuses the bass more in the centre doing it this way with it swapped and phase inverted. It works. So I did that. So this fatter, bigger, warmer, less trebly side, I've got it set like this now. I might completely change it. I'm actually cutting all the lower 50 Hertz. Well, not all of it, but I mean I'm doing a low shelf 8 dB cut at 50 Hertz. Giving it a little bit of 10k top, which is really probably doing nothing. Then I'm using a medium Q here at low 400 Hertz. That's right down at the bottom of your low mids. And there I was sort of trying to bring back primarily the body of the snare, but it brings body into the bass and the kick drum as well. But there's other things going on, remember. because after this, on this more bassy track, I've got a quad compressor. So I'm doing this, I'm giving it this big boost at 400 Hz here and a very low cut here. And then I'm doing a mid cut here at 1K with a very wide Q, and then quite a lot of treble boost up at 4K with a wide Q. But the quad compressor comes after this, where I'm compressing the snot out of the bass end with quite a, that should be a long release. It says 250 milliseconds. Until you touch it, then it gives you what you really, it should be on more than 250. So I'm scooping down, I'm scooping this a bit in the low mids here, right? Even though here I'm boosting those low mids at 400 Hz, but with a fairly tight Q. Okay. But this low mid band here is going from 186 to nearly 1K. So, you know. So this multi-band compressor is also affecting the EQ curve. But I'm compressing the different bands at different amounts. I'm compressing, as you can see, the bass end a lot more and the low mids a lot more than the upper mid area, and the high end's really got nothing in it. But that's having an effect as well on the EQ curve, as well as crushing certain things that I want squashed. Okay, then on this other track here, I'm not using the phase reverse or anything like that, but I started off with this EQ, and on this one again I'm giving it a big boost down at 400 Hz, but this track is thinner. It's still going to be the frequency of the body of the snare, and particularly the snare, that sort of bop 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 frequency, the way the real thwack of the drums, toms and things comes out, as well as a bit of the kick and the bass. And again I'm giving it a boost here just above 1K at 1.4, and a lot of boost up at 6.2. I'm actually giving it some low shelf push as well, and some high shelf push. But then I decided in front of it, and this might sound mad, but when you're doing this kind of material, it doesn't make any difference, you're mangling the shit out of the sound. In front of it I put a regular channel EQ with a low shelf, cutting all that bottom end out below 50 Hz, a slight presence boost here at 3.7K, and then dipping down the upper end, which was a bit harsh. And that comes before it goes into this. So it seems counterproductive. I'm boosting 3.7K here, and then here I'm doing a high shelf cut and a peak cut, which all combine at 6K and above. Then back here I'm boosting the shit out of it at 6K again. But it just, that's how it works when you're doing this kind of stuff, right? So sticking with the thin track here, after that I'm then putting it into a chroma reverb. It just seems to work. It brings something out of the mix more, to put it through this quite large concert hall reverb, but not much of it, and with the internal damping of the reverb rolled off at the low end, it just makes it sound bigger. But if you overdo it, it's you know, it starts to sound like it's in an indoor concert, right? Then it's going into a spreader. I'm actually using a massive amount of spreader on it, and then it's going into this another T-Rex plugin, this white channel, which is an SSL 9000 emulation, and I'm using something on this. I'm giving a little bit of low mid boost at 1.2. No, that's not right, is it? What is this set to? Yeah, 1.2K. A little bit of boost at 1.2K. And I think the compressor is working a little bit. Let's just watch. Yeah, so a little bit of the a little bit of this. So I've got this EQ doing this, then it goes into this Sontec clone where it's doing that, big boost, low, mids, upper. Then it goes into the chroma reverb where some reverb's being added. Then it goes into the spreader where it's being spread, and then finally into this T-Rex. Primarily I brought this in to use the channel compressor. But in the process of using it, I just gave it a little bit of boost here in the mids. And yeah, it's all about that compressor, the reason I'm using this, right? Okay, that's where I am with that particular track. Then the bass end track, the more bassy track, that's got the gain, phase invert and left right swap, and I'm balanced the pan just to balance it, so I'm getting the same level on the meter. But it's centered, you know. Then it goes into the master EQ, where I'm doing this big low end boost, cutting the upper mids, or the mids. And that's because that's on this track where all the vocal yelling and screaming of people standing next to the person recording is. I'm giving it a big old boost at 4K. It's quite a tight cue on this 400 boost here, but I'm cutting the low end here, right, because it's quite a bassy track. But then after that, it's going into the quad compressor where I'm scooping out those lower mids, right? That's how it is now anyway. Now both of these tracks combined are then going to this group bus. And on that, I'm doing more stuff to the two channels arriving here. I'm getting a bit of this LA2A clone compressor. I love this compressor, absolutely love it to bits. You've got to get this. It's just, particularly on vocals, man, you just put it on a vocal and it makes the vocals just pop. You know, that's one of the things that the LA2A is renowned for being used on in the real world. Yeah, it just, you get that sort of tight compression that crushes the attack of the word a bit, so that but only at the, you hear the crush at the absolute split second of the start, and then it lets it through, sort of thing, albeit compressed, and it just gives this clarity and punch at the start of consonant sounds. Anyway, I'm just using a little bit of this, not much, okay, just to sort of do that. Then it's going into a regular channel EQ where I'm scooping out these mids here. That's the combination of both tracks with whatever they've got on arriving here. So for some reason, I don't know why, I'm scooping it out here, quite a tight scoop at 600 Hertz. Then an overall upper lift here. Then it goes into a T-Rex 1. Now this is one of T-Rex's own brand processors, so to speak. It's not an emulation of something else. And this thing is incredibly versatile. It's amazing, this thing. You've got a push amount, yeah, like, you know, more and more gain reduction. Air is upper air frequencies, focus is mid frequencies, body is bass frequencies. There's a width control, volume control, transients, bass punch, and analog. And this is just adding something if I bring it in and out. Okay, so there's that. Then I'm trying a few things after it. There's this soft tube Drama S73, which I'm using just for this extra little smoothness. This is just somehow, in this particular setting of clarity, with very little of it happening, it's squashing harshness in the upper frequencies, which I've had to bring in to try and get clarity in the vocals and guitar. That seems to be mostly what that's doing. And then finally, I am experimenting with putting a black knob SSL channel on there. Black knob's got tighter Q, and this is my final sort of EQing of the two channels combined on the bus after everything else. Again, primarily I'm using it to get the compressor, the SSL channel compressor. But I've used it to put a bit of boost, 60 dB of boost on at 266 Hertz. A tiny little cut in the low mids at 700 Hertz. 3.8K, sorry, 3.7K, a little bit of boost there. Nearly 4 dB of boost. And a little bit of 2.8K. But it's really again about this compressor. This is just some little tweaking I did. When you've got them balanced like that, you don't want to lower this treblier track and mess around with its level relative to the bassier track. That's what you gotta do, baby. That's what you gotta do, girl. So you're just squashing everything down. Finally, after all this enormous chain of mangling, I'm just using this channel compressor again, the SSL 4000 channel compressor emulation, just to squeeze it a bit. Also, it's reducing some of that honk. At 700 Hertz. Anyway, that's where I am so far, but this is by no means finished. The thing about this mixing this kind of material is you can faff around with it and it will sound okay in so many different configurations of how you've done it. So you can kind of, you can never arrive at anything you're really satisfied with because the recordings are so poor. Now if I lower this track, done from further away, this is the one by the fence, and the audience are doing their usual, look how excited there are certain people who go to a Rolling Stones gig, and I've been to 3 now. There are certain people who go there and they want to demonstrate to everybody else how much they like the Rolling Stones, which seems as if they become themselves part of the performance. It can be a right pain in the fucking arse if they're standing next to you, to be honest. Anyway, I mean, it's more than your usual enthusiastic person at a gig type thing. It's almost like they're putting it on. And if we roll down this track, done further away, as particularly in this first song, you can hear a lot of whooping and hollering. Well, they settle down a bit as it goes on, you know. Anyway, there you go. That might be useful and interesting to you. This is by no means a traditional use of EQ. Okay, this is incredibly extreme things that I'm doing here because I'm working with extreme material. It's extremely mangled, extremely poor quality. So the fact that I'm going absolutely bananas with it, massive amounts of boost or cut, and putting it through multiple EQs and multiple compressors, it doesn't make any difference. It's not degrading anything. I'm basically juggling a load of frequencies which are already pretty mangled to try to come up with something that just is a reasonable balance. I can hear the upper end without it cutting my ears off. I can hear the body of the mid, particularly the snare and the toms. And I've got the clarity of the vocals and guitars and things, but without it being too, you know. Yeah, so I might even put a de-esser on it, just to tame the high end, which I could put on the thinner track. That's something I might do. But anyway, but this EQ is incredibly useful. because it's not constantly variable. You do have these choices of band, and you can switch between them and hear differences. It's just a very, very, very nice EQ. As I said, primarily designed for mastering, but it works great on individual tracks. You know, if you want to brighten up vocals or acoustic guitars or things, fatten up basses, drums, whatever you like, synth. It's a fantastic little EQ, and like with all the T-Rex stuff, it has the left, right or mid side processing. Nearly all their plugins have that, you know, where relevant, and obviously that only is if you're on a stereo track. Also, like all the T-Rex plugins, there's a simple reset button to get back to nothing. There's an in-out button to take the effect in-out so you can hear it in-out. There's an undo and redo button, and then you've got this wonderful bank copy. All their plugins have this. So I've set this EQ, which is in bank A, so I copy, I can then paste it into B, C or D, boom, B. Now B's the same. I could then change frequencies in B, and then on the fly switch between A, B and listen to the difference, and you can have up to 4 of those. It's absolutely brilliant, bloody clever that. Yeah, so there it is. That's the T-Rex Master EQ 432, which is this Somtech clone, and very bloody good it is as well. It's a fantastic EQ. As I said, if you want to go out there and look for comparisons, there is that one video by that guy Streaky Mastering where he gives you an A-B, and close your eyes and see if you can hear a difference, albeit he's using it very subtly, as you would in a normal mastering setup. He's using it just to give a bit of air up the top end, and I think a little bit of some mid boost or something like that. So it's very subtle what he's doing with it, but switching between the two, you really can't hear any difference at all. And he mastered it very high, as high end as he could, with prism converters and everything, and it's all done professionally. He's a mastering engineer, so he knows what he's doing, albeit it's then on a YouTube video. I don't know, I haven't looked to see if he's got high-end, you know, 96k or above WAV examples or AIFF examples you can download and listen to here. I don't know, but anyway, but a very, very versatile EQ. Part of the T-Rex range, you can buy it individually as a plugin. And I hope that's useful. I can't play you too much of the material through it because I'll probably get a copyright strike, won't I? But I'll tell you what, it was a bloody great gig. It really was. Where is... Yeah, Keith does his bit after the band intros. You got the Silver and Happy. Then it goes to Miss You, then Midnight Rambler. They brought on... what's his name? Taylor. I think for Midnight Rambler. Can't remember his name. Taylor. Mick Taylor. He actually played the gig, which was great. Gimme Shelter. Can't Get What You Want. That started off with a choir that came on. My favourite is what's the one called? Well, it is that one, isn't it? The lyrics, there's something about the lyrics that are just very sad. Perhaps because it's describing a bygone era when things were more... You might not think so because you think you're living in this wonderful free society now. Back then you'd be busted and thrown in jail for smoking dope, you know. But there was some sort of thing there that this track touches on in the lyric. It's hard to explain. A glass of wine in a hand. And I went down to the demonstration to keep my fair shade. Now This is my favourite bit because I live in Chelsea. It's just something about it. It gets me. I don't know why.
When I went out to the Chelsea drugstore to get your prescriptions of beer, I was standing in line with Mr. Jimmy.
But you meet you meet all the nutters around here. The thing about when I moved to this area is it used to be Chelsea was full of old school Chelsea people. Yeah, a lot of creative people, and then the old school wealthy people who didn't have actually any money. They just had a house that was worth loads of money, and it was more interesting. Now it's been taken over by the merchant banking class, and it's all Range Rovers and everywhere. Whereas when I first moved here, it was, you know, everyone was driving around in Volkswagen Polos and Honda Civics and things like that. There wasn't this sort of ostentatious show of wealth everywhere. And but you just still do meet some unusual people around here. I was on the bus the other day and this old bloke got on, quite scruffy looking, you know. He sort of looked a bit, not physically looked like him, but in terms of the way he was dressed, and he had the plastic bag with all his stuff in, sort of Ron Jeremy, do you know what I mean? And he must have been 70, I suppose, or something, and he came down the bus and he was wearing a Kiss t-shirt. Well, I just happened to be wearing a Kiss t-shirt myself. Everything else was in the wash. I get the Kiss t-shirt out every so often because it's a good way to detect fake rock and roll people who claim they like rock and roll, and then they go, "Oh, Kiss is shit." Well, they don't really like rock and roll, you know. You cannot say I like rock and roll and then say that Kiss is shite. You just can't, because they're such an important part of rock and roll history. But anyway, this old bloke got on and he came down the bus and he said, "Oh, do you mind if I sit next to you?" And I looked up, he was wearing this Kiss t-shirt, and I went, "Why not? We're both wearing Kiss t-shirts." So we sat down, and then it turned out, I was the first. I put Kiss on in England when the first ever gig in England, and it turned out he was an old promoter. Oh, I used to put on all those bands, Megadeth, Kiss. I gave them their first gig, set up their first gig in Britain, blah blah blah. So I've got his number. We exchanged numbers, and we're going to go for a beer. I love meeting up those old guys and reminiscing with them. You meet these kind of people around here. Like there's a couple of times, there's a guy I know, and he's got a friend. He's brought him around a couple of times, and we've drank whiskey and smoked spliffs. And this guy's well into his 70s. He used to be the Beatles publicity manager. And he sits there pissed and goes, "I have been a millionaire 4 times and lost everything and then became a millionaire again." And he was the Beatles publicity manager, then he wasn't, then he was, then he wasn't, then he was, you know. And he's only, then you want to get him going on Brian Jones' swimming pool death and all that. And he gets all, you know, Brian Jones was a personal friend of his, and I'm not going to go into what he thinks about the whole swimming pool incident. But yeah, you do meet those interesting people around here, you do. There's something that's now being lost about this area, which is a damn shame, because it used to be interesting, and now it's just new money wankers and, you know, young bloody Saudis and whatever driving around in their dad's fucking Lamborghinis. It's just become really wanky. But there's still a few people around, and there's just something about this line just I don't know, it reminds me of old Chelsea, I suppose, even though it was way back before, when I was a little kiddie.
When I went out to the Chelsea drugstore to get your...
So just to show you, what is it? Which EQ is this? Let's get this here and get this master EQ. Okay, so now bear in mind, both these tracks, this one now that I've got the EQ for the thinner track and the fatter track, are both going into this bus where tons more EQ and compression is being added, but this is the thin track. So I'm boosting it to 1400.
Prescriptions of beer. I was standing alive with Mr. Jimmy.
Look at him, amount of boost I'm giving this, huge amounts of boost, huge. But listen to the difference between these very tightly, very close bands. It's 12 dB of boost, a colossal amount. Tighten the cue up. You know what I mean? It's even at colossal amounts of boost, in what are potentially harsh frequencies. It's glisteny. It's got a glisteny, silvery quality to it, which is really good. Anyway, that is the T-Rex Master EQ432. Well worth checking out, I can tell you. You can get any of the T-Rex plugins as demos. My recommendation, if you don't want the mastering suite, is to get the T-Rex Custom Shop, which allows you to try all of the plugins. Just you choose a plugin to demo, and it could be more than one. Set up the demo, and you get it's at least 2 weeks of proper use to really try it out. And then if you want to buy it, you just buy it. And there's, see the little shopping cart there? That's for the custom shop, and that takes you directly to the custom shop. I own this already, but there it is. Takes you from the plugin direct straight to the shop, the custom shop, where you can click the try button and instantly it'll be authorized. Well, pretty much instantly. Go down and you've got all these are the top sellers, etc. Or buy it. And this particular EQ is €149. Not sure why it says new there, because it's been out a fair while, unless there's a new version. But like it says here, this model really is as good as it gets. The secret weapon to give mixes that finishing polish, yeah, with peerless high-end air. Well, I know that is true, as I just showed you with these potentially harsh frequencies between a 1K and 6.2K. A massive 12 dB boost with fairly tight Q. You can hear it sizzling away as it going from that metallic to more silvery sizzle across these frequency areas. But even on this ghastly material with huge 12 dB of boost, it's not cutting your ears off, you know. So yeah, it's a good one, man. It's a good one. The T-Rex Master EQ432. I hope that's useful.